Ultimate Teacher was released the same year as Akira. Just let that sink in for a second. So if you've never seen Ultimate Teacher, it might make the most sense to stop watching this and go check it out immediately. However, if you want to be a true delinquent rebel, complete with a pompadour and a bad attitude, you might just want to keep watching this episode anyway because you do what you want to do, and I respect that. Alright, good. We've weeded out all the weebs that didn't even know what they clicked on, so let's get into this. While I would assume most people are familiar with Akira, I'm going to take a guess that many of you did not heed my warnings and are a little bit less familiar with this off-the-rails surrealist comedy that is known as Ultimate Teacher. So let's do this. Let's figure out what Ultimate Teacher actually is, and then let's take a look at how it didn't stand a chance against one of the biggest anime films of all time that just so happened to be released, well, around the same time as Ultimate Teacher. This is a one-shot parody OVA about Emperor High School, a school full of delinquents and other bad boy anime stereotypes. This school is such a mess that they have to hire a deranged lunatic to come whip these fools into shape. However, on his way to the school, this weirdo runs into an innocent, cute anime girl. And it turns out, this cute anime girl is the leader of all of the delinquents at this school. Because anime, so he eventually harasses her, fights her, pelvic thrusts her, but she eventually defeats him, then he comes back, and then he gets defeated again, so, it's just a normal tale as old as time, but, this doesn't sound like the most deep or game-changing story because, let's just be honest, this anime isn't the most deep or game-changing anime. It is what it is. A lot of people like to make fun of this show based on this silly plot, the animation, how over the top it is, but it's meant to be a comedy at the end of the day. People seem to forget that and look at it more as one of those whole Japan is so zany type of shows. However, I think there's a little bit more to it than what I just brought up. This one-shot OVA was released February of 1988. Guess what came out in July of that very same year? Akira. Now, if you want a summary of that movie, you're in the wrong place, but let's just say it was a big deal. Gunbuster also came out in 1988, as did Project A-Code 3, Dominion Tank Police, Vampire Princess Miyu. A whole bunch of classics were released in 1988. If you were an otaku, there was a lot of new material for you to jump into. And then you have Ultimate Teacher just hanging out on the side that was released in the middle of all of this, but it's never brought up in the same conversations. I mean, I like the show, and even I won't argue that it's on the same level as, well, anything we just mentioned. However, I think that's the first problem that this OVA has. It was a little bit too late to the party. Now, I get that this show was never destined to be a genre-defining mammoth, but let's be honest, it was dated the second it was released. Remember hair metal? Sure, in the mid-80s everyone loved Motley Crue and Def Leppard, but when Nirvana came to the scene in 1992, everything changed. However, even in 1992, there were still hair bands coming to the scene that could have been huge had they came to the scene, well, just a few years prior. I'm not going to say that Ultimate Teacher could have been Bon Jovi, but the way things played out, it was much closer to Pretty Boy Floyd or South Gang in the scheme of things, while Akira was Nirvana, because it was new and revolutionary. That being said, just like Nirvana, Akira's roots were in the past of the medium, but it came off as something brand new and revolutionary, because it was. There were also similarities between Ultimate Teacher and Akira, just like there were between Skid Row and Nirvana, but the final products in both cases were, well, very different. And I think that Ultimate Teacher would have been looked at, well, very differently had it been released in the early to mid-80s. By 1988, the standards were changing at a rapid pace, and Ultimate Teacher just looked like a relic from the past the second it was released. Now, I know you might be asking yourself, what similarities do these two anime share? Well, Ultimate Teacher and Akira are both ultra-violent, they both have delinquents, they both are very over the top in many of their scenes, they both could scare someone away from the anime medium in general, or actually draw them in more depending on how they take in these pieces of art. And both of them will never be as good as Mad Bull 34 no matter how hard they try. So that being said, not only was the timing not on Ultimate Teacher's side, but the presentation wasn't either. Look, I'll just say it. Ultimate Teacher looks kind of bad. I think the 80s were the absolute pinnacle of anime, visually speaking. Modern shows may objectively be cleaner and the presentations may be more grand in scale, but 80s anime is just a vibe. Unfortunately, this OVA is not a vibe. I like to think that they tried at least a little bit, because I like to think that anyone tries at least a little bit when they release something, but this show looks worse than some TV anime of the time, and it's an OVA, so it should look better. Now, I know comparing it to Akira is a little bit unfair, but Dominion Tank Police is an OVA from the same year, and it looks great. Dominion Tank Police really jumps off the screen and makes you want to see more of its world, whereas Ultimate Teacher, it just kind of looks flat. Nothing really pops out at you, the colors are muted, and it just doesn't make you want to explore more of the potential Ultimate Teacher cinematic universe that never really happened, but could have been bigger than Harry Potter had this show performed just a little bit better. But unfortunately, it just looks kind of bad. So no expanded universe for Ultimate Teacher. How will we ever get by? And maybe this show would look much better with a nice Blu-ray upscale. I mean, most shows do, but until Discotek gets around to doing that, we're stuck with these VHS and Laserdisc rips, and yeah, again, they just don't look that great. Okay, so we've come to the conclusion that timing was not on this show's side and the animation was kind of bad. But what else really hurt this show in the scheme of things? Well, its reputation. Now, I don't know how this show is looked at in the modern Japanese fan community. Honestly, it seems to be all but forgotten, so maybe it's one of those out of sight, out of mind things, but in America, it had a bad reputation from the very beginning, and it only got worse once the internet discovered it. I think a lot of people just didn't understand that this show was supposed to be a comedy, and you couldn't blame them. The dubs weren't very good, and they were kind of played with a very serious tone. The marketing also wasn't very good because it kind of played up that fake serious tone and manliness, which of course this show is more of a parody of those type of shows and succeeds at that. But when you combine that with the fact that a lot of the jokes were also cultural jokes based in Japan, and when this thing was released in the 90s, we really didn't have a ton of access to even know a lot about the country outside of what we were given in America. Yeah, this thing was destined to be misunderstood. Akira, on the other hand, was universally praised out of the gate in both America and Japan. Good for Akira, I guess. And I'm going to assume this thing did not sell terribly well in America because it never even made it to DVD. In the early days of anime on DVD, there were much worse shows that made it over to the format, but if it's based on sales, then this is not a good indicator of the show's quality. And over a decade later, the show resurfaced when AniTube became a thing. And most of those content creators were not kind to this show. However, it also wasn't bad enough to gain notoriety like Chargeman Ken or the Superman Nintendo 64 games, so I guess it needed to suck a little bit more or just be a little bit better for the internet to really latch onto it. Yeah, it's weird. The internet's a wild place. So there you have it. When you combine bad release timing, kind of bad animation, and a bad reputation, I guess your anime is destined to fail, or at least be forgotten. But both of these scenarios hit Ultimate Teacher in spades, and I do think it's unfair. It's not an amazing show, but it's a fun way to spend a little bit under an hour of your time, or maybe even a little bit more of your time if you make a video talking about it and throw it up on the internet like I am doing right now. And on that note, I actually think the runtime really helps this fever dream of a show. It didn't need to be some 3-hour Marvel movie, but it's perfect where it is, being just under an hour. It's fine the way it is, and I'm so proud of it for that. Realistically, Ultimate Teacher never stood a chance against something like Akira, and it's just ridiculous to even try to compare the two of them. I just found it so interesting when I realized they were released during the same time with such drastically different quality and such drastically different reputations. Obviously, Ultimate Teacher never had the goal to compete with Akira, but it did accomplish its goal to make a cheap, fun parody anime. It even did pretty well, assuming that was the actual true goal here. So if you've never seen this insane show, I would recommend checking it out. I've tried to avoid speaking too much about some of the more bizarre specifics of the show, just so you can make that wondrous discovery on your own. Because it's a good time. It might have not changed the anime scene, it might have not changed the world, and it might have not changed anyone's lives, but at least in my case, I enjoyed it a lot more than I ever have any music that was released by Nirvana, so it will always, always, always have that going for it.